The context and implications of U.S. President D.J. Trump's remarks on Somalia. Introduction. The tenure of Donald J. Trump as the 45th President of the United States was marked by a distinct shift in diplomatic tone and foreign policy communication, frequently characterized by blunt rhetoric and direct public statements. Among the numerous nations that drew his criticism, Somalia, a country long grappling with instability, terrorism, and humanitarian crises, became the subject of several pointed remarks. Understanding why a sitting U.S. president would seemingly insult a nation attempting fragile reconstruction requires an examination of Trump's broader foreign policy approach, his domestic political calculus, and the specific context surrounding his comments, particularly concerning immigration and counterterrorism efforts. Trump's foreign policy rhetoric and immigration stance. A central feature of the Trump administration was its focus on stricter immigration enforcement and a transactional approach to international relations. Many of Trump's critiques directed at foreign nations stemmed from his belief that these countries were either failing to control their populations entering the U.S. or were not adequately reciprocating U.S. aid or security assistance. Somalia often fell into the former category due to its significant diaspora population in the United States, particularly in Minnesota. The context for some of the most controversial remarks often revolved around refugees and asylum seekers. Trump frequently characterized certain African nations, including Somalia, as sources of individuals whose integration or security risk profile was deemed unsatisfactory by his administration. This rhetoric played directly into his base's concerns regarding border security and cultural homogeneity. For a high school student analyzing this period, it is crucial to see these comments not merely as random insults but as strategic tools aligned with his America First agenda, where perceived national self-interest superseded traditional diplomatic niceties. Counterterrorism and security concerns. Another significant factor driving presidential commentary on Somalia was the persistent threat posed by al-Shabaab, an affiliate of al-Qaeda that controlled or contested large swathes of Somali territory. The U.S. has long been involved in counterterrorism efforts in the Horn of Africa, providing military training, intelligence sharing, and direct drone strikes against militant targets in Somalia. When security incidents occurred, or when the administration felt its counterterrorism partners were insufficiently committed, criticism sometimes materialized. Trump often expressed impatience with prolonged international conflicts and perceived failures in allied nations to stabilize themselves, viewing continued U.S. involvement as a drain on resources. Insults or harsh characterizations could therefore be interpreted as pressure tactics aimed at either soliciting greater cooperation from the Somali government or justifying a potential reduction in U.S. footprint by publicly highlighting the country's perceived ongoing failures. The role of specific incidents. While generalized criticism was common, specific events often triggered more explicit language. For example, following terror attacks abroad that were linked to individuals who had emigrated from Somalia, the administration would often use these tragedies to underscore its position on immigration restrictions. In these instances, the insult was less about Somalia as a sovereign state and more about using its current challenges, instability and militant influence, to reinforce domestic policy objectives regarding vetting and entry protocols. This conflation of a nation's security challenges with the actions of a small subset of its émigrés was a recurrent feature of the Trump administration's communication style regarding several countries. Diplomatic fallout and international perception. The impact of such presidential language extended beyond domestic politics. Remarks perceived as insulting damaged the delicate diplomatic relationship between Washington and Mogadishu. While the U.S. remains a crucial partner for Somalia in terms of aid and security, overtly hostile language complicates the ability of local leaders to work effectively with the U.S., potentially empowering hardline domestic opposition or even groups like al-Shabaab who use anti-American sentiment in their recruitment efforts. A knowledgeable observer notes that while security cooperation often continued behind the scenes, the public tone created unnecessary friction in an already volatile region. Conclusion. The reasons behind any perceived insults directed by President D.J. Trump toward Somalia were multifaceted. They stemmed primarily from his administration's overriding domestic focus on immigration control, which framed Somalia primarily through the lens of refugee flow. This was compounded by an impatient strategic view of counterterrorism operations, where slow progress was often met with public condemnation rather than traditional diplomatic encouragement. Ultimately, These remarks exemplified a broader pattern in his foreign policy, utilizing aggressive, personalized rhetoric as a primary tool of statecraft, often prioritizing domestic messaging over conventional diplomatic